Welcome to Talking Grit, a Detroit Lions podcast. Talking Grit is brought to you by the Monroe County Reporters, Monroe's top news source for police, fire, and community events.
Post 3 and Depot Street. Truck boy at request.
Follow them on Facebook, and for $2.99 a month, you can become a subscriber and get the news you crave even faster.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Talking Grit. I'm Jason Harwood, and with me is Jacob Litton. You're going to have to excuse Jacob and I. We just got done drafting and our fantasy teams, and we both stole each other's players at different points, but we're not going to bore you with our fantasy football stories. What we are going to talk about today is the practice squad and our reaction to the roster. And Brad Holmes had a really long, like 36-minute press conference today, so there's a couple interesting tidbits said in there, so we're going to touch on that. Before we get started, there was a listener question today. Matt on Reddit asked a question, and it was very appropriate, just happened to lead into what our topic was going to be today, so it was like perfect timing for us. If you're a listener out there and you got a question, you can hit us up on Spotify. There's the comment section you can do there. There is just send us a text message. You can also email us at talkinggritpod@yahoo.com. Any which way, we're also on Twitter. However you want to reach us, we'd be glad to cover your question on the pod. It's fun to interact with everybody.
Okay, so here's what Matt on Reddit says. Now that the 53 has been finalized, he has a couple possible questions. What does it mean financially for a player when he makes the 53-man roster? What does the salary for practice squad players look like? And if a practice squad player is elevated for a game, which is pretty common, what kind of financial compensation kicks in? So we're going to let Jason educate us on these different scenarios here.
Yes. So there is a ton of different scenarios. There's tons of different details and stuff like that. But essentially, I got the correct information here and just going to try to be as succinct as possible. So first part of the question, what does it mean financially for a player if he's making the 53? Basically, if he makes the 53, then he's, whatever they signed a contract in the offseason or the ongoing contract that he's going on, that's what he's going to play for this year. It's not guaranteed at all. However, what I think Matt may have been thinking about is if you are on the roster week one and you have at least 4 years of experience, then your contract for the season becomes fully guaranteed. If you're not on the roster week one, then all that goes out the window. So for all those people that made the 53, their money's not guaranteed yet. They could be cut and, any guaranteed part of their contract obviously is going to get paid, but any non-guaranteed is not necessarily going to get paid. The second part of his question was, what does the salary for practice squad players look like? There's 4 different groups of practice squad players. Group 1 is players that have not accrued any experience at all. Group 2 is if they have less than 9 regular season games of experience. Group 3 is they have earned no more than 2 accrued seasons, so they get no more than 2 seasons in the NFL. And Group 4 is there's no limitations on it. Now, between Group 3 and 4, so those are your more veteran players, you can only have a max of 10 of those on your practice squad. And for Group 4 with that, may have accrued for more than 2 seasons, you can have a max of 6 of those. So you can't just load them all, your team all up with all veterans. You're going to have to have some less established players in there. So Group 1 and 2, so those are your, newer players, they'll get $12,500 a week or a total of $225,000 if they stayed on the roster all 18 weeks of the season. They do get paid in the bye week regardless, so even though there's not a game, they get paid. That accrues for all of them. Group 3 is, they've had at least two accrued seasons. They get $16,800 per week or $302,400 for a season. And Group 4, your most established players get $21,300 or $383,400 for the year. So pretty good amount of money, more than a lot of us see in a year. So pretty good amount of money. for 18 weeks, but, it's not guaranteed. They could be cut at any point and that money goes away. The last question was, if a practice player gets elevated for a game, what is financial compensation kicked in? So they will get paid the veteran, or they're going to get paid league minimum, and that depends on how many years of service they have. So basically, if you're a first-year player and you get pulled up, you're going to get $44,166 for that week.
Real quick, just what difference does that make from the practice squad week? I mean, so you said if this is a player with no experience or little experience, their practice squad salary was how much for that week?
$12,500. So you're looking
And
like
it
a
jumps up.
about $32,000 for that week. So
Which is very meaningful to these guys.
Oh, yeah. Yes, exactly. It's a huge chunk. I mean, that's like 3 times your salary that week. So each 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 to 6 years, and 7+ years, they all have different amounts of money. If you're 7+ years in the league minimum is $1.21 million per year. So you would, divide that out. It's prorated, divided by 18. That's what they would get paid for a week. If you get pulled up, you do get a minimum of 3 weeks salary, even if you're up for 1 week. We talked about that's 3 times the amount. Well, they're going to get that for 3 weeks. So that's to get pulled up to the active rosters, a lot of money.
That's huge
for some of these guys. So let's move on to, we want to talk about our reaction to the initial 53-man roster. So Jacob, what was your thoughts when you saw it? What was your surprises? What were you happy about? What went through your mind?
We kind of knew when we made our own roster, when we did our own prediction. Obviously, we weren't expecting it to be perfect. We knew there was going to be maybe a surprise or two, but for the most part, we had it down who we thought was going to be on the team. Really, the most surprising to me, outside of the fact that they cut to 52. So the roster needs to be cut to 53. That's what your final roster has to be at. And they cut an extra guy and made it down to 52. So that was surprising to me. There's more, I guess, Brad Holmes playing chess instead of checkers. There's more things at play here. But outside of the number, really cutting Pecco, I think, was the most surprising cut for me. Based on the fact that he hadn't been playing in the preseason, how good he looked in practice, and how much you heard about them raving about him and everything. That, I think, was the most glaring thing right away. In hindsight, he's not subject to waivers. I'm sure they had some sort of discussion with him that, the plan was still going to be, he was going to be part of the plan. And for the NFL rules, you can only put 2 players on IR during training camp with a designation to return. Broderick Martin and Emmanuel Mosley were both put on IR. So John Kaminsky, I think the plan was always for him to go on IR, but he had to be on the active roster for 1 full day before he could be put on IR. So that seems like that's always what the plan was going to be, and it has turned out Kaminsky was put on IR. They still have not elevated Pecco yet. He's still right now standing on the practice squad, but I think that was the most glaring, surprising cut to me. What about you?
Yeah, when I saw Pecco's name on the cut list, I was like, what is going on? Especially when we knew Broderick Martin was hurt. And I was like, man, we are going to be really light on the line, and thought it was really, if we just cut Pecco without playing him all preseason, it was, you and I were working together and we were trying to figure out what were the possible motives on all that. But I think it's come clear, Kamish going to IR, Pecco, he didn't have to go on waivers, so he wasn't subject to going to another team. So they probably had a discussion with him ahead of time with what the plan is. But I think talking about what we talked about, guaranteed salaries for week 1, maybe Pecco is not going to be elevated. He's going to be like an elevated on game day. And then I don't think he's subject at that point to getting his full contract guaranteed, because I think Pecco is just there until they know that DJ Reader is going to be right. And maybe now until how serious the Broderick Martin injury is and how long he's going to be back. So that's why I think they put Pecco on the practice squad. But yeah, that was totally surprising. The Sudfeld thing was surprising for a lot of people. I had him that he was going to be out, especially when the emergency quarterback rule was revoked the day before the cut down. So we had talked extensively on a previous podcast where you can bring up a quarterback on, that was on your practice squad as emergency rule if your top 2 quarterbacks got hurt. Well, the Players Association decided to revoke that rule like a day before the cut down. So that totally changed that like whole dynamic on that, which kind of made me think that they were going to keep them both. It changed the outlook, but they ended up cutting Sudfeld, and we talked about Jake Fromm, and he ended up making the practice squad. Which that whole deal about Fromm coming in for 2 weeks, and then suddenly he's on the practice squad and Sudfeld's out when he's been on the team for multiple years. So that was shocking to me.
Yeah, no, I was surprised by that too. I really, if you heard the way that Campbell talked about the situation with Hendon Hooker and Nate Sudfeld, it really didn't seem like they were sold on Hendon as the number 2 guy. Who knows if that was just a smokescreen or, what they were trying to accomplish there. But yeah, cut Sudfeld, let him go. And then to find out he actually is not even on the practice squad, we went with Fromm for the practice squad. It is surprising, but I think that's the right call. I think just in the little small sample size we got from Fromm, we could see that he had, I guess more promise. There was like a higher ceiling for Fromm than what there was for Sudfeld. And I know we've talked in the past, Sudfeld does a lot behind the scenes, or, he's helping Goff, he's helping run scout team, he's helping look for different things, but evidently that value wasn't enough to warrant keeping him around. And right now, Sudfeld is still on the street. He is not anywhere.
Yeah, who knows? He could end up on the practice squad, but that's pretty packed tight, and I don't think there's going to be room for 2 quarterbacks on the practice squad. So,
right, no.
The Lions still have a spot on their active roster that they can use, because, like you said, they haven't elevated Pecco, so we don't know if that's going to be, who knows? That could be Sudfeld they bring back, but I don't think they'd be if that was the intentions. I don't think they'd be leaving Sudfeld hanging in the wind like that, but maybe. So that was shocking, and then I guess the other shocker was Lauren Strickland making the roster as a safety. And I think, I don't know, I had 5 safeties making it, but CJ Moore was going to be in there, and Lauren Strickland made it, and they, they had CJ Moore initially on the practice squad, and then they just cut him today. So, it's quick moving. The initial 53 is exactly that, initial 53. It usually changes within 24, 48 hours with the waiver claims and all that stuff.
Yeah, the undrafted free agents making the team was surprising. It was nice. We both made the call on Isaiah Williams. He looked too good in the preseason to not have on the team. And, Brad Holmes actually said in the press conference, really, that he was somebody on the radar to draft. This was somebody that we considered drafting. So, he goes undrafted. We're still able to get him on the team. And then he shows out kind of what they thought he was going to do and then makes the roster. I guess if you were betting on which undrafted free agent was going to be making the roster, Isaiah Williams would have been at the top of everyone's list. He was, on most predictions and everything, he deserved it.
Yeah. Well, Hatton, your long snapper that we both were wrong on, he ended up making the other unrestricted free agent. So 3 of them made it, which, for a Super Bowl contending team as such the Lions are, to have 3 undrafted free agents make the roster, that was very unexpected. We were all wondering which one was going to make it, if one could make it. Right. And then 3 of them end up making it. So I think it just speaks to the Lions leadership. If you, show your value, they're going to, it doesn't matter if you've been with the team for long or not, they're going to take you if you show the talent and show the willingness to practice and show all the, the grit.
Absolutely. Ray Agnew in the press, he said that's the great thing about this place. If you're the best player, you're going to play. They didn't really take too heavy into consideration where they were drafted or, where they came from. It's what you're doing right now. And ultimately, Hatton, I guess, was just, they said extremely athletic, and he made plays all camp. It's something we didn't really see a whole lot of just because you think of him as a long snapper. But I know we've talked about this before, too. They said you're going to have value outside of just special teams. And I guess that includes the long snapper. Everybody's got to, pull more than one part.
Yeah, I think we talked about this in, our last pod of the initial was Hatton's, abilities to make plays outside of just snapping the ball. Was that going to be enough for him to make team? You and I both speculated that, the known value of Scott Daly handling and pressure situations was going to be more than what Hogan brought to the table. Now, you could also look back. We have Jake Bates, who's an unknown quantity with the kicker. And now we have a long snapper. Fox is in the middle. We know what he is. He's awesome. But the two people on either end of that ball are, we don't have any in-game experience with them yet. So it'll be interesting. Hopefully we just don't hear his name very much outside of making a tackle or whatever. You don't want to hear his name. You don't want to hear the long snapper's name for the most part because that's usually brought up when bad stuff happens.
Yeah, time will tell if the long snapping ability matches the athletic ability that he's shown.
Yeah,
I'm all for the long snapper going down there and forcing a fumble and making a huge hit stick, but let's just focus on snapping the ball.
Right.
Clean.
No, that's got to be number one. Who knows? He could end up being on the kickoff. Being athletic as he is, he could be on a kickoff. Blocking team or something like that.
Exactly.
You don't know, but whether you want to risk an injury, if you have him on those other units and he gets injured, and Daly just signed with the Bears practice squad, so I mean he's not necessarily available. Just to bring right up from the practice squad for our own practice squad. So that's something to think about.
Well, you also can't really keep a practice squad position for somebody that's just the long snapper.
That's correct.
Generally.
Generally you're not going to do that unless the only reason you do that is if you know that your long snapper is dealing with an injury, but you don't necessarily want to put him on IR. So you might have someone on, that you can elevate. Hopefully we don't have to do that because then, you're taking up a valuable spot with a long snapper. We talked about Kaminsky went to the IR today, so they held off a couple days. After the press conference, they put him on the IR, but they still have not made a move to correspond with that. So there's still just an open spot essentially. So we had talked about that there was 52, and when they initially did the list, it was down to 52. Lions made a waiver claim. We got Trevor Nowaski back, linebacker. He was on our team all last year, and then injuries happened, and we basically tried to get him on practice squad. Arizona picked him up. Well, he got waived during these cutdowns this year, and so the Lions put a waiver claim on him, and so he's back on the active roster, which put us up to 53 for a minute until they put Kamish on IR. So now we're back down to 52. So we have a free roster spot. I'm sure they have a plan for that, or they'll move someone around, whether it's up from the practice squad or signing someone else.
The other guy that may be surprising to some, there was a real 50-50 chance on him, was going to be James Houston, the edge rusher. We talked about that a lot, how much value he has, rushing the quarterback, and if that was going to be enough to keep him on the active roster. And it turns out that it was. We weren't sure between him and Isaac Ukwa if he was going to make the team. We knew pretty much if you cut Houston, chances are he's going someplace else. He's not going to be stashed on the practice squad. And turns out the Lions decided to value his pass rush ability, and he stays on the team. How do you feel about it now that you were wrong?
Oh, thanks.
I know you're used to that feeling, but about this particular...
I don't know if I mentioned in the pod, but I think we talked about it at work when we were talking about, James Houston, keeping him or whatever. I thought he was going to be traded. I knew that they were going to either have to keep him. I don't think they were going to cut him for nothing. It was just reading Dan Campbell's press conference. I just was very unsure. And even AG's press conference, when someone asked him about James Houston, it's very non-committed. They, didn't talk glowingly about him. And so it really made me pause for concern. I thought that another team may value him more than the Lions. But, guy that could pass rush such as him, very valuable, especially if he could stay healthy and we can keep him on the field. There's definitely value there. It's just a matter of, is he more valuable than another player that could help us in multiple areas? Because he's got, one job, and that is, rush the passer on second and third and long. So, but it's a very valuable skill that he has. So, that's how he can make the team. Just that one skill. He's really, really good at it.
Right. You got to be really good at it. I still, honestly, nothing's guaranteed. We've already talked about that. I still feel like this is kind of a 50-50. Like, he's got to show up and continue to show up in practice. And I mean, I guess we'll see from here. Maybe it is still something they're exploring, is possibly trading him or trying to figure out what they can do. Maybe the plan's always been just to let him, come in and pass rush situations and see what he's got this year. It's not like he has a very big contract, but he is taking up a roster spot from somebody else that potentially could help out in more than just the passing game like that.
Yeah, well, it also might just depend, and he might not make the active roster for the day, right? If we, depending on the team we're playing, say they're a heavy rush team, we're going to want, big bodies in there and people that could set the edge. James Houston is not that guy. So maybe they just, he's not active on game day. He's on the active roster, but he's just not in the active 46. So, I mean, in that case, you don't have to worry about waiving him or anything like that. He just doesn't dress for the day, but we'll see. I mean, we still got some time. He came in with a sack in the last game, showed his potential. So hopefully he can do that during the season. The guy had 8 sacks in 9 games. That's a special number. So, and he was injured last year, so we really don't know. And they tried him at the SAM and all the stuff that we had talked about before. So hopefully he shows his value. I'm rooting for the guy just like any other Lion. So hopefully he can do it. All right, let's move on to the practice squad.
I do have the list. I've got it separated by which ones spent training camp with us, because there's a couple guys on the practice squad that we got from other teams.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll just go right down. This is the initial practice squad. So the day of, the first day the practice squad came out. So there's already been some changes on this list. Initially, we have Mitchell Agude, Kingsley Equaquin, Jake Fromm, Jamar Jefferson, Jamarco Jones, Tom Kennedy, James Mitchell, Kyle Pecco, Chris Smith, Isaac Ukwa, Shane Zylstra, and safety CJ Moore, who is actually no longer on the practice squad. They removed him from the practice squad and added Donovan Peoples-Jones. But then the couple of practice squad people who were not with us for training camp, we have Pat O'Connor, who is a defensive end. He actually was drafted by the Lions. Let's see here. The big ones, the ones we're all excited about here, are going to be our receivers. So we did get some traditional X guys, and that's wide receiver Allen Robinson, who was cut from the Giants, born and raised in Detroit. So that was very cool for him to come back. And then the other one is going to be Tim Patrick, who was the Broncos wide receiver. I think that's somebody that, we're all feeling pretty excited about. And the rumors are that he's here, he's on the practice squad. That's more so to get him acclimated to the playbook and the team and everything. They probably are going to be putting him on the active roster.
Yeah, I think, you got the 3 wide receivers on the practice squad. So you got Tim Patrick, you got Allen Robinson, you got, Donovan Peoples-Jones. You might wonder why we bring DPJ back if, he didn't make the roster. He was kind of disappointing all through training camp. My feeling is that it's short-lived that he's on, if one of the other 2 guys work out, Tim Patrick or Allen Robinson. DPJ knows the offense right now, so if we need to elevate him for week 1, we know for sure he's, at least could be functional in our offense and know the plays and know the calls and stuff like that. But, if Tim Patrick or Allen Robinson pick it up pretty quickly, then, that may make DPJ expendable. So I don't think we're going to carry all 3 of those. My feeling is DPJ is probably going to be gone unless he really, this is a wake-up call and he starts really performing. I think you're going to more likely see Tim Patrick or Allen Robinson. And out of the 2, Tim Patrick, I think, is the one that's, he is a Lion. Will help block, big body, 6'4". He's going to be someone that, will get open and give Jared Goff a large target, because we only have one 6+ foot target on our active roster right now. So, have you looked at the film on Patrick at all, or, did any research or anything like that, Jacob?
Yeah. So my friend is actually a huge Broncos fan. So I knew about Tim Patrick before, and that's somebody, I think I texted you as soon as I saw that he was cut. I was like, we've got to get this guy. We've got to get him here. Very excited about the possibility of what he could bring to the offense.
The video that I saw, really good about knowing zone coverages, sitting in a pocket, being a big target for the quarterback, which is, what the Josh Reynolds role was. Someone that Jared Goff can count on where he's going to be. Tim Patrick has very good hands, very reliable, which is, what you want on your third down receiver, right? Your big option, or someone in the goal line. You want to have reliable hands and just, reliable route runner. So I'm happy with that. So if I were going to bet, as long as Tim Patrick's healthy, he's been out last couple of years with different various injuries, but he's a hard worker. So he was healthy all the preseason. So if he can remain healthy, I look for him to, lock down this position. I hope so, at least. And he came from the Broncos. So it's basically, Josh Reynolds stayed over there and we ended up getting Tim Patrick.
Yeah, that's interesting. Based on how it's played out, the fact we haven't been able to find that guy, nobody stepped up and everything, where it stands right now, do you think it would have been a better move to just pay Josh Reynolds and keep him on the team?
For my uneasiness and everything like that, yeah, probably. I mean, but, reportedly the Lions offered him 2 years, $5.5 million. He ended up getting 2 years, $9 million for the Broncos. The Lions know him best, right? And I was wondering initially if Josh Reynolds left so that he'd have a more active role in a team's offense, because, he did have a role with the Lions, a very important role, but he wasn't going to be the first choice on anybody's fantasy board. He's not going to get tons of looks. We'll see how this works out. I'm going to trust Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell on this one. For both of them saying they wanted Josh Reynolds back, there must have been a limit of what they wanted, because we have the cap space, but they didn't want to commit that much to him, which is interesting.
Right. That's the interesting thing, is that we really, obviously we'll see as the season goes on, but as it stands right now, we haven't really benefited. It looks like it would have been better to keep him on the team. Obviously he had a role. He knew his role. He played it pretty well for the most part. He did have those crucial drops that kind of killed us in the playoffs, but
I was wondering, do you think that had any role for Josh Reynolds to not want to come back? Those drops.
You would think you'd want to redeem yourself. I don't know that he really obviously he got some backlash and everything from the fans, but I don't know if that really pushed him out of town, or like you said, did he want more money? Did he want a bigger opportunity? I don't think necessarily he's somebody that can line up there as a 1 or a 2 and consistently get open. I think the reason he was so effective is because of how he played in our offense, and exactly, that was ideal for him. That was the perfect spot for him to be in. He wasn't relied on too much, but he was a big target in the red zone, big target on third down. You've got teams worried about Amon-Ra, Jamo, Laporta. You don't really have that in Denver. I just don't see him having as good of a season in Denver as what he even had here last year, even if he gets more targets his way.
Well, I mean, you look at Josh Reynolds 1 year in Tennessee. I mean, I know it's different. I mean, but the quarterback situation is definitely different in Denver. They're starting a rookie quarterback, so it's not like he's going to an established quarterback over there. He had very good chemistry with Jared Goff. Obviously his time with the Rams and then coming over here to Detroit, he flourished both times with, Jared Goff as a quarterback. It's interesting that he didn't, that it just didn't work out, because obviously he's comfortable with Goff. So it's a weird situation. I would have thought he had been back, but, he's not lying anymore. So we'll move on to, it's either going to be Patrick or Robinson eventually, or DPJ just kind of holding down the fort, as a week 1, week 2, just be ready to play if we need to plug someone in. Isaac Ukwu made the, practice squad, which I'm excited. Hopefully he gets an opportunity at some point. I mean, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell said, all these players on the practice squad are going to get their chance at some point. Injuries are inevitable. I was happy that Ukwu made it on our team. Mitchell Agude, I was happy, and Kingsley Eguaquin. Super happy those guys are on the practice squad, because I think those guys have a ton of potential. I'm intrigued by Jake Fromm being on the practice squad. I don't, if he makes if he makes up to the roster this year, doesn't mean anything good's happened. So if he just remains on the practice squad all year, I'd be all right. Kyle Pecco making the practice squad. it was interesting that he didn't make the active 53, but it may have to do with guaranteed contracts. May have, because they may not want to guarantee that whole contract if they don't plan on him being there all year with DJ Reader. But it's interesting how they chose to do this. I don't know how all those deals happen. Yeah, and then they had CJ Moore on the practice squad for like a day, and then they cut him for Eric Hallett today. And I think that has to do with the season accrued. We're only allowed so many veterans on the practice squad, so I think we had to cut CJ Moore because he had more accrued season. So then we, get DPJ on there. We had to cut someone with a veteran status. I think that's why all that happened. The next thing we're going to talk about is Brad Holmes' presser, but this kind of leads into it. He said that he wanted to keep a veteran kicker on the practice squad. So right now it's full. So, whether that's going to happen sooner or later, that, someone's going to probably be removed off the practice squad. And maybe they're just going to try to get a look at these wide receivers. And then, we got 4 of them on there. They might cut one. But I kind of surprised that when they brought Eric Hallett on that they didn't sign a veteran kicker. Now we could talk about the Brad Holmes presser today. It was 36 minutes long. Really long press conference. He doesn't do a lot of them. He does most of them all around the draft, and he'll do typically one after during this period before week 1 and after the active roster. So, I love how open he is in his press conferences. He gives you actual interesting thoughts, and he's not as guarded as some other general managers. I generally enjoy listening to him talk about the team, and I can always learn something when he's talking. Anything that specifically that jumped out to you from the Brad Holmes presser?
Yeah, there were a couple different things. One really, which we kind of just talked about, they said that, basically the agents of almost every wide receiver and kicker were really trying very hard to get their guys in Detroit. Obviously, the league knows our wide receiver and our kicker situation. So that's no surprise, really, that, they're really trying to get their foot in the door. They're trying to compete. And we've talked about that before, too. We've become a destination team. People want to come here. I saw something about when Tim Patrick signed. There's a Broncos news story that said Tim Patrick leaves to join Super Bowl contender. And it's wild that, the Lions are Super Bowl, seeing it like that. Obviously, we know what we are. We know that we're Super Bowl contenders. But to see it like that, just, obviously a great feeling, reiterates that we have respect around the league now. They know that we are for real. He just said the calls with the agents have changed. When he first got here, you had to convince a lot of people to try to come to Detroit. You had to try to really sell the city and sell the team and what we were trying to build. And now we're built, now we're established, and now guys are wanting to come here, which is, great. That's best case scenario, is that you build a program and you build a team that people want to come to. They want to play for Dan Campbell. They want to play for this city. It's just awesome.
Yeah, I think Hard Knocks has a lot to do with the perception around the league of how this team's run and just what kind of coach Dan Campbell is. That came at the perfect time for Lions as we were ascending. And so a lot of people got to see that. And then, we didn't start out really well that Hard Knock season, but then we end up finishing real well. And that's what people remember. And then obviously last year we won the division. So, it's nice to have that in your back pocket, that you're a destination, you are Super Bowl contender. Those players that, that can really add some value to your team, those veteran players that they, have a lot of experience or whatever, and you can have them step in based on an injury or something like that. You're going to have an easier time convincing them to come to your team rather than, we're 1-6 and, we're the Lions or whatever. So I'm love this version of the Lions. It is so refreshing. And like you said, that Super Bowl contender line from, written from the Denver newspaper, that's pretty cool. That means it's not just us as Lions fans talking about this. It's teams around the league notice the talent level and the expectations. Speaking of expectations, in the Brad Holmes presser, someone asked him, what are your expectations for the year? And it was a simple answer: Super Bowl winner. It wasn't any coach speak. It was just for real. Super Bowl or nothing. That's what I want to hear. And we're ready for that. We've a half away from making it that last year. So, that's got to be the step. We got to take the next step.
Absolutely. I mean, the team building part's over. Now we're here. We're established. We've got our squad. We know who we are, what we're capable of. We just got to put it out there on the field and get the job done.
Yep. And we got the coach to do it. You got Dan Campbell in there that's just not going to let them rest on last year's accomplishments. You saw the fights early in the practice. I mean, that was, just how hard they were working. I just think that, this is a team that's built for success. It's a team that's not going to let themselves down, not going to let their coach down, not going to let the city down. Speaking of the city, Brad Holmes had nothing but great things to say about the city. It gave me goosebumps when he was talking about, this is a different fan base because, you and I, Jacob, have been fans for a long time. We've dealt with a lot of adversity, wanting to be a fan of this team that just kept disappointing you, whether injuries, whether having, not the right coach, or you bring in a GM that doesn't know what they're doing, all those type of things that we've dealt with. And then, we get a winning franchise, something that everybody can be proud of. And you could see how the city responded. And Ford Field is an electric place. The preseason game sold out, standing room only tickets. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen everywhere. This is a special place. And for him to recognize that, call that out, thank the fans, part of it is a very good sports town. This team is built with gritty players that we could be very proud of. When I think of like classic Detroit teams, I mean, I think of the Bad Boys, and I think of those early 2000 Pistons when you didn't have a real big superstar on the team. You had, Tayshaun Prince, you had Chauncey Billups, you had Ben Wallace. Those
Rashid.
It was good team basketball, and they could overcome, the Lakers with Shaq and Kobe. That was a time that was a gritty team. I'd say that was a real grit team. Tayshaun Prince having that awesome block on Reggie Miller, just hustle, blocking that shot. That is just an epitome of what I think that team is all hustle. Rip Hamilton just, doing his thing. Those are the type of teams, that you think of the 2006 Tigers. Didn't have a lot of superstars. We had Pudge, but we had the right coach at that time, right? We had the right manager. Jim Leland comes in, similar to Dan Campbell, just come in and, the right leader for the team, for what you need at the team at that time. And you saw how the city responded in 06 and continued to respond why the Tigers were a playoff contender. It's what the city's about. The Red Wings, obviously historic franchise. They've had those teams too. Steve Yzerman, that's grit. That is a gritty player. So, we've had the teams that have done good in the city have been built that similar way. And this is a team that's no different. And Dan Campbell's a coach that is a very special leader. We're lucky to have him. And I view him in the same way as Jim Leland, just a special person forever in Detroit lore from what he's already done and hopefully what he can accomplish. Jim Leland never got the championship here, which is really a shame with the teams that he had. Dan Campbell, I don't think is going to disappoint us in that way. I think he's going to bring one here. He won't rest until he does. So, it's a really special thing that they're recognizing the city. We had the draft this year too, which just adds to all that. It just all came at the perfect time.
This, obviously, Detroit is just a really, really great sports town. I would put it up there with pretty much any other one that they could possibly come up with. As you kind of spoke about already, all the other teams that we have, the Pistons, the Red Wings, the Tigers right now playing over 500. They're competing for a playoff spot. We really rally around these teams. And for a long time now, we have not had, a whole lot to cheer for. And I think that's also culminated. Maybe that's why the response for the Lions has been so great too, is that it's just so long overdue. We've been waiting for so long for something like this to happen. And, from the top down, it seems like we have the perfect coach, the general manager, the owner, everything's clicking right for us right now. And it just feels like we've really turned it around. And I think that that's rubbing off, on some of the other Detroit sports teams too, as far as, the success that they look like we're set up to have in the near future.
Well, and you had Eisenman turning around the Red Wings. They were one game away from making the playoffs. So, I mean, that was an exciting last bit of the season last year. And the Tigers are lined up to have a very similar end. I'm hoping they can end it up in the playoffs, getting that wild card spot. That's very doable at this point. So, you're right. They're all feeding off each other. And it's an exciting time to be a Detroit fan. If the Pistons can ever do anything, that would be
Right.
That'd be the icing.
They're the ones that still need to turn it around. But yeah, so anybody listening that's kind of just a Lions fan, or maybe you're not from the Detroit area, but you've latched onto the team, if you can find a way to get down here to Detroit, I promise you it's not as bad as you've probably been hearing about. They really get a bad reputation when it's not. I mean, I love Detroit. I can't say enough positive things about the city, everything that's down there. Just there's nothing like that environment being in a Lions game, especially when the team's doing well now, how loud it gets. I know you've all heard the stories and everything, but you've got to experience that.
Yep. Yeah, I get goosebumps just thinking about a lot of that stuff. And, when I head up there for week 1, Sunday Night Football, Stafford, I'm expecting a, playoff environment. It's going to be a lot of fun. So it is a really good experience being in Detroit. And like you said, Jacob, downtown has changed a lot for me in the last 20 years. It is built up real nice. There's a lot of things to do down there. If you can make it in town, it's worth it. It's a lot of fun. So a couple more things I want to hit on that Brad Holmes mentioned. He talked about the Liam McNeil contract. It's like in its infancy. So earlier we kind of seemed like that might maybe something that could happen before the season, but it does not look like that's even close. So it's probably going to be something that happens next off season. And it could get a lot more expensive if Aleem has the year that, we're expecting him to have. So
there's a very large variable right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he could play his way into a very big contract, or if he's, playing at the level that he was last year, which, I mean, he's still a solid player. He still warrants a new contract for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to keep him around. But yeah, the dollar amount is going to be vastly different depending on how this year goes.
Yep. And then the other player that they mentioned was Jamo, and there was a question about him. And I found that it was interesting. They said he has a lot of growth as a person, but also, as a player, but also as a person. So they kind of admitted that there was some immaturity early on and he needed some growth. And Brad Holmes even said that, having his injury might have been a blessing in disguise, that gave him more time to mature as a person and just get ready. Because he loves football, and now we saw him in practice. He looks different. He looks a lot more comfortable on the field. I think it's a lot to do with the preparation that he did in the offseason. He looks ready to play. He looks ready to, contribute on this team, which we're going to really need him. So it was really nice to hear Brad Holmes and Ray Agnew's thoughts on Jamo. They both had really nice things to say about him as a player and a person. So, and they're expecting big things this year. So hopefully that comes true.
Right? Us too. We need it. It's time.
Well, especially you, because you stole him in the fantasy draft ahead of me. So had him in my queue.
Of course I had to get
Jamo. Yeah, you took him like 5 picks before.
You waited too long.
I did. I mean, you took him 3rd overall. No,
yeah,
just kidding. Right. Oh, no. Just kidding. Season's getting closer, man. Today's Thursday. So a week from today, we got football, right?
One more week.
Yeah, we got Chiefs, Ravens. That was us last year. A week from now, that was us. And what a story that turned out to be. We got to wait a few extra days, but I think it's going to be worth it. So going to be awesome. If we're not on the opening day game, then Sunday night's the next best thing to be on for opening week. So, all right. That was good. Let's get into our Honolulu Blitz.
It's time for the Honolulu Blitz.
So we talked about the undrafted players making the team earlier. Who is the only undrafted player to win NFL MVP?
It's Kurt Warner.
Correct. Do you know what year?
Wow. 2001?
You're right. So he won twice. It was in 99 and 2001. Good job.
All right.
All right, this is the one we kind of talked about already. But so who do you think is going to have the most receptions for the Lions out of Tim Patrick and Allen Robinson?
If it's up to me, it's Tim Patrick.
Will they both play this year for us?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, Tim Patrick has some injury history, so yeah, let's say that they both have a shot. I mean, who knows? I mean, I want to see Allen Robinson get his chance at Detroit. I mean, we all wanted him a few years ago, and when he was a free agent, it's probably a good thing that I don't know, maybe he would have played better with Detroit. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But he didn't really didn't really do that much with the Rams, and I don't think with the Steelers. I think that's where he was at last year, right? At Steelers, I'm pretty sure.
It's just weird for the talent level that he's had that it just hasn't translated lately.
Yeah. Well, then he got stuck with the Bears at the beginning, so that whole situation. Yeah. So, I mean,
those turds.
Yeah, exactly. Turds. So
couldn't think of a PG. Couldn't think of a PG word to say.
Okay. All right, let's go.
Not what I wanted to say.
All right.
If you can bleep stuff out, I'll go on a rant here. But
no, we're not that kind of podcast. But I do like the fact that you said turd.
All right. Last question. How many times has Dan Skipper been waived by the Lions in total?
So
whether that be cut, whether that's just cut or cut injured or just cut
Oh man.
Officially waived or injured release.
I know he had the tweet that this 8th time's a charm, but he didn't
that was referring to his training camps.
Training camps, right? I know. So I know it's got to be and then I can't remember because I know 1 year he was on the Colts, and then we end up taking him after he got cut by the Colts. Man, I must say 12 times.
So by my count, according to the official transactions, it's 6 times.
Okay.
Which doesn't seem like enough, but it was in 20. So this was 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. He all had waive claims by the Lions for those.
Okay. I was just wondering if it was during the season, if he was brought up and then cut. So that's why I went with that. But
he, a couple of those years, he had those too. But, he also, he's played for the Cowboys, the Broncos, the Patriots, the Texans, the Raiders, the Colts. Wow. He spent off season with almost all of them. I don't know how many regular season games he had to play with any of them. I know obviously the Lions has been the most, but yeah, he tweeted the 8 times was a charm.
Yeah, well, I remember this first game that he played when he was active that, Dan Campbell gave him the game ball and you could see that he had tears in his eyes. So, it's a lot of work. These guys, that's why cut down day is so hard. These guys work their butts off for their dream, and then some just get dashed and never get that opportunity. So I'm glad for Dan. He seems like a good guy. So, yep.
For sure.
All right.
Deserving of the 53 spot.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Happy for him. So he's a good guy. All right. I got 2 questions for you. I have 3 questions total, but the first 2 questions deal with your favorite Lion of all time. So, and that's Calvin Johnson. So when he retired, he held the record for the most consecutive games of 100 or more receiving yards. So most consecutive, I don't know if he still holds it, but he did when he retired. How many games did he have 100 or more receiving yards in a row?
That's tough. I don't know. I'm going to spit out a number. I'm going to say 24.
Just 8, a third of that. So close, man. Close.
I thought it was going to be some miraculous number, and that's why this was a question.
8's good, though. I mean, you figure 100 yards, for a receiver, he was just hard to take.
Well, they could put 3 guys on him, and it just wasn't happening.
Yep. All right. So, speaking of our boy Calvin, how many rushing TDs did he have in his career? Rushing TDs?
Yeah. 2.
1. He only had 1. I was shocked when I saw that. I was like, if he was in today's NFL, he'd have way more than 1. He'd be run a lot more than.
Do you have what year that was?
I didn't look that up in further.
It must have been rookie. Just, they tried an end around for, I feel like it was he had a couple running plays. And I know one was a 20 or 30 yard gain or something. I don't know if that was the touchdown though.
I think if he was in a Ben Johnson offense, they would just use him. I mean, the guy's huge, has tons of speed. You would think that, I think in today's NFL, you would have him rushing a lot more than what we did back then. So, all right, my last one has to do, JJ McCarthy got hurt. So now Sam Darnold's going to be called on to be the quarterback for the Vikings, and if he stays healthy, maybe all year. How many yards does he end up with, passing yards does he end up with this year?
Well, let's see. He's got the whole game, or the whole season. He doesn't have a rookie threatening behind him. They're probably going to be down a whole lot, so he's going to be throwing the ball. I'll say he throws for 4,100.
4,100. Wow. It's a lot for Sam Darnold. You're really going to go 41? They got some receiving threats
Vikings,
there.
Right. I think the Vikings are probably only going to win a handful of games. He's going to be throwing from behind, and he's got the targets. So
if he throws for 4,100, he's going to make a lot of money next year. Either
you think so?
Not like top quarterback money, but he's going to get a job next year somewhere. So he's going to either get top backup money, or he's going to some team's going to sign him knowing 4,100 yards. I don't know.
Well, I hope that number is 3,000, but
yeah. No, it's going to be 4,100, but just like 150 when he plays us. But yeah, I don't know.
Right?
He's going to have to stay healthy and stay on the field. So that's a large number. I would go. I mean, I get it. You got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson comes back. There's a lot of weapons there. So yeah, he could throw some yards. And Kevin O'Connell, their head coach, likes to throw the ball. There's no doubt about that. So if he stays healthy, yeah. But I mean, how many interceptions is he going to throw with that 4,100? We'll see if it's
probably a bunch.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins played 8 games last year and had 2,300 yards.
But I am going to write this 4,100 down, and we're going to go back to it because I got to have documentation that you said Sam Darnold's thrown for 4,100 yards. Okay. All right. Got it.
And you can put on there if he plays 17 games, we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, no, 18 weeks. We'll see if he plays, All right, man. Well, this has been fun. We're inching closer. Next week we'll have our game preview. We are going to do an NFL preview. So I know this is a Lions podcast, but we're going to do an NFL preview show. We'll probably be out Tuesday morning. We're going to, go through every division, kind of, predict the placement of all the teams, talk about surprising playoff teams, those type of things. And we're going to have a special guest on that episode too. So it should be fun. That'll come out on Tuesday, and then a couple days later we'll have our game preview, and we're going to be getting ready for real Lions action. It's almost here. So thanks to everybody for listening. It's been a pleasure talking with all you, and this podcast thing is going amazing, and it's all because you guys keep listening. So we appreciate that. All right, for Jacob, I'm Jason. Go Lions.